Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Denzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Denzel, and can I just say, had it not been for Andrew McCutchen's 3 home runs last night, yesterday would have been a pretty dark day. If you don't know, Andrew McCutchen, who is the star baseball player for my Pittsburgh Pirates, has had a rough start to this season. It's become almost a tradition for him that he does not play well in April. And actually, overall, the Pirates, despite having some nice teams the last 3 years, their Aprils have been very, very slow. And in fact, you could say last year that them having a terrible April to about the middle of May actually cost them the division. Because from May on, they had the best record in baseball. They played the best baseball from mid-April or mid-May to the end of September last season, 2015. But it was that start to the season that put them well behind the Cardinals, and they could never catch them. Of course, the Cardinals ended up having the best record in baseball overall for the season. Well, this year it's been a little different. The Pirates are 3 games over 500 after beating the Colorado Rockies yesterday. And Andrew McCutchen, though, going into the game, was batting .213. And he took a day off on Monday, and then he comes in last night, which would it be Tuesday night, and hits 3 home runs for the second time in his career, and he hasn't done that since his rookie year in 2009. So it was nice to see because he's been having a little bit of a tough time. The team has been winning despite him, not because of him. Everybody else in the team is hitting the crap out of the ball. They have the highest batting average in Major League Baseball, the highest on-base percentage. But then their star was batting .213 going into last night. So it was a little bit of a surprise, needless to say, that he gets up there and hits 3 home runs. Of course, it helps that they're playing in Colorado where the ball goes probably 10% farther or something like that. Now, contrast this with yesterday and what happened with Donald Trump, just to get right into the show. We go seamlessly from baseball to politics. We just have to admit something, us Never Trump people. Last night was going to happen, and there wasn't much we could do about it. In fact, what we saw last night had been coming for weeks. I always draw the example of earthquakes, like what happened in Japan recently or a few years ago. Terrible earthquake they had with the tsunami, and then before that in the Indian Ocean, and then recently in Ecuador. Those earthquakes, if you believe in a certain way, the way the world works and the way nature works, those earthquakes were going to happen since the day the earth started. However you believe it. Through the Big Bang, through a work of God, by aliens, whatever the case may be, those earthquakes were going to happen. Nothing you could do to stop them with current technology. Nothing you could do to predict them. Same way with Donald Trump. Since this all got started last summer, and if Donald Trump was going to stay in the race, was able to stay in the race and get enough votes in those early states, last night was going to happen. Why do I say that? Because we know the type of people who live in the northeast part of the United States. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, look what he did in the southern states. We'll get to that in a second. But it was going to happen up there. We know the kinds of people who call themselves Republicans, and some of these, at least some of these states were open primaries, but just to keep it easy, we know the types of people who call themselves Republicans in the Northeast. They're the people who are stupid enough to stick around as their states have gotten more liberal and more liberal and more liberal. All the good conservatives, Republicans, for the most part, have moved, or in such a minority that they have no influence on anything anywhere in the northeastern United States. Remember that it was just a few years ago that there were no Republican congressmen from any northeastern state. Not one. Between Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, New York, Rhode Island, all blue. Now, that may have changed now because of what happened in the House in 2010, 2012, 2014. But it wasn't long ago that none of those states had any Republican representatives. Now, we know that they've had some Republican senators, Olympia Snowe, but we know what kind of Republican she is. Wishy-washy. Granted, we'll take her, but kind of wishy-washy. Scott Brown, remember that going back to 2008, 2009, 2000, or the special election that he won. But we know what happened to him as well. He kind of just disappeared and then tried to run in another state. Bizarre. We know a couple of those states now have Republican Republican governors, like Maine does. But you just have to remember the kinds of people who are still there that vote Republican. They're not conservative. And I say that knowing that there are some conservatives there. They're just not that very many of them. And I have good friends who are conservative Republicans who have chosen to remain in those areas. I tell them all the time, you got to get out of there. You should leave. The smart people have moved to Nevada, Florida, and Texas. All right? Trying to remind them, do you know what your net worth would be? Do you know how much easier your finances would be if you lived somewhere else? You're doing decently well for yourself. Imagine if you lived in a state with no income tax, without the regulation and everything else that goes along with living there. Imagine you being able to own guns without having to get 10 different signatures and background, or well, you get background checks anyway here, like in Florida, but 10 signatures and they crawl up your butt trying to figure out who you really are. You don't have to go through that in a state such as Texas or Florida. Do you know what that would be like? You'd be able to protect your family, protect yourself, protect your property. A lot easier than living up there. But those people continue to stay there as if they can't get jobs anywhere else, which isn't true. There are more jobs in the southern and southwest part of the United States than there are in the Northeast. There's a reason that those states continue to lose electoral votes, and Texas and Nevada and Arizona and Florida continue to gain them. There's a reason. So given all that, it should be no surprise that Donald Trump should get 50, 60% of the vote in these places. Shouldn't be any surprise. Now, I will give them one little bit of credit on one point. Turnout was down. See, this is the big problem, one of the big problems, that I have with those Trump people out there who say, Trump's going to get people to vote who have never voted before. Oh, you mean like in the Northeast where nobody wants to show, where some people just can't even get motivated to show up? You mean that kind of motivation? That's something we're going to have to remember, that as well as Donald Trump is winning, his votes are being easily passed up by the amount of people voting for either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. I think that was a good example of that was in New York. As much as easily as Donald Trump won there, it was nothing compared. Now, granted, there's more Democrats than Republicans in New York. It's not even close, but still, what do you think that means for a general election? All these people think he's going to widen the map. No, he's not. He's going to shrink it. There are all signs that he is going to shrink the Republican map should he get the nomination. I can't help it. You people don't want to see that. Now, as far as what happened in the South, you may say, well, look at Ed. You make fun of the Northeast. Aren't you going to make fun of the South too? Look how he won in Georgia and South Carolina. Different. Now we're essentially talking about a 2 to 3 man race, and Ted Cruz did not even campaign in any of those states yesterday. Whereas when Trump was winning those southern states that normally vote Republican in presidential elections, how many people were still involved in that? 5, 6, 7 candidates? All splitting up the anti-Trump vote? We know what happens in those states that are somewhat Republican states now that all those other people are gone. Ted Cruz won, or have you forgotten so quickly that he won like 5, 6, 7 states in a row? Have you forgotten that already? It just goes to show there is no momentum in politics. In fact, there's no momentum in anything. There's only momentum in physics. And politics is not physics. Sports, part of it is physics. But the actual winning from day to day, there's no momentum. There's only going out there and playing the game. Momentum is just something people talk about because they need to fill airtime. Or is it not feel, but fill airtime? Not feel, F-E-E-L. It's fill, F-I-L-L. I try to pronounce those two words differently. So Ted Cruz won some states. Why? Because the field was narrowed and they were very friendly Republican conservative states. Then Donald Trump turns around and wins all these states last night. Why? Because a bunch of moderates live there. And once again, it's because it's down to a 2 or 3 man race, and one of those guys just chose not to campaign there, and John Kasich has no money left. So yesterday was going to happen. There is nothing that happened in the last 2 weeks that changed anything. It wasn't like Donald Trump was going to lose those states, then said something brilliant, and all of those people changed their mind. This has been coming for months. And it happened. You know what it's like? It's like being in high school and knowing the entire semester that you're doing terrible in a class. This would be more like college, I suppose. And you go back for Christmas break, and it's just a matter of waiting for your report card in the mail. Or maybe they email them these days. I don't know. You just know that it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. You know what you did. You know you got a D in that class. It's just the formality of seeing on the official piece of paper. That's all this was. That's all this was. I should say something else. This is why, as much as I've been making fun of the popular conservative media and what they've been doing for the last 20 years and how I think that they've led us astray, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but because I love that topic. They have gotten one thing right. Moderates suck. That's been a main complaint about these wishy-washy people in the middle who are doing this. That's who went out and voted for Donald Trump yesterday in those states. Why? Because that's where those people live. I know that the Northeast is seen as a very wealthy part of the United States, a lot of old money in that area, but when it comes to politics, the Northeast United States is the cesspool of politics. Is there any doubt about that? At least when it comes to the Republican side. You know, I can stand that Washington and Oregon, for example, going to the Pacific Coast, I can stand that they vote for Democrats, and they've had some Republicans too. I can stand it. You know why? Because they don't have a history of being Republican. There wasn't. You have to remember something. In American politics, it is within my lifetime, the last 40 years, that those states used to vote Republican. It was flipped around. And then the southern states, if you ever want to see like a weird type of situation, go look at the electoral map for Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter in 1976. And just see how much has changed in 40 years. Quite a bit. Now, granted, in 1980, 84, it was all the country was almost painted entirely one color, and that was Republican. And somewhat in 88 as well. Since then, 92 forwards, there haven't been any big, huge blowouts, even though some of them weren't close. Even Mitt Romney won quite a few states in 2012. John McCain won quite a few in 2008. We know 2000, 2004, how close they were. But you want to go back to something weird, go back to 1976. And try to figure out what happened to all those Republicans that lived in those states. Did their values change or did they move? I think they moved. Liberals got a hold of those places, and a lot of those people just said, the heck, we're getting out. It also had a lot of things that have gone on in the last 40 years in the United States. A lot of changes in states. Blue to red, red to blue. Tax systems cause people to move. Weather causes people to move. Empty areas of the United States where land can be bought for cheap cause people to move. But the Northeast, I can only shake my head. Now, granted, I grew up in Pennsylvania. We know what happened in Pennsylvania. I want you to know that my family, at least from what I know, my parents voted for Ted Cruz yesterday. Now, what they're going to do in a general election if Donald Trump's the nominee, I'm still trying to work on them on that. I happen to think that they are still set upon doing anything to vote against the Democrat. We'll see if I can have any influence on them. We'll see. Probably not, but we'll see. But they voted for Ted Cruz yesterday. Just as I'm sure some other people in my family did not. So my home state of Pennsylvania, where I lived for 28 years, didn't do me proud yesterday. And it hasn't, of course, with presidential elections, it hasn't done me proud since 1988 was the last time Pennsylvania voted for a Republican. And we've had a couple decent senators in there. Rick Santorum had a Republican governor who lost. Had Pat Toomey. Some nice, Republicans here and there. But just it went the way of Trump as well. And you just got to live with it. And you just got to hope that Indiana goes differently next week. And it seems that John Kasich is doubling down on his idea. Yes, I'm getting my money out of the state, but I'd still like my supporters to vote for me. Unbelievable. But I predicted it on Monday. I just heard this alliance. I said, there's no way it's going to work. Let's move on to something else. I don't want to get you too down about what happened yesterday. It's just a fact of life. It's just no different than that girl who breaks up with you. And sooner or later, you're that girl that you really liked, and she breaks up with you for every stupid or smart reason. Eventually you're going to find out that she's going out with some other guy. It's just a matter of time. It's going to happen. That's just the way life is. Now, I have heard that Ted Cruz, I'm recording this show early afternoon Tuesday, or Wednesday. I forget what day of the week it is. It is April 27th, right? But Ted Cruz is going to have a major announcement at 4 o'clock today, 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm hoping it's something let's put it this way. Here's what I hope it's not. I hope it's not that he's saying that Carly Fiorina is going to be his vice presidential pick. I'm hoping it's not that. I'm hoping it's not that he is getting some endorsement from some senator who I could care less about. It better not be that Mitch McConnell has come out and decided after all this to endorse Ted Cruz. I'm not going to be too excited about that. I also would not be excited if John Kasich and Ted Cruz even got closer together and Ted Cruz came out and said, John Kasich and I have decided to form a ticket. I'm going to be the president. He's going to be my vice presidential pick. I wouldn't be thrilled by that either. I'm hoping that he comes out at 4 o'clock and says that, now, of course, by the time I'm talking about this, you'll know what happened. I'm hoping that he comes out and says that Mitch Daniels, who used to be, the governor of Indiana, who's now the president of University of Purdue University, however they say that, or that Mike Pence, the current governor of Indiana, have come out to endorse them. That would be good. That would be good. I'm just wondering if it's not just a little too late. I know we have 6 days to go, but I don't know. You would have thought that these guys, what I think I know about Mike Pence and Mitch Daniels, is that as soon as Marco Rubio would drop out, that these two guys know that Indiana, that primary is coming up, and Indiana has been talked about. It's a big deal for about a month now. You don't think that these guys would wait until 6 days before to come out and say something like this? It's not exactly the biggest endorsement. Now, it could be the reason. It could be the reason is Ted Cruz and his reputation among his fellow senators and reputation among other Republican politicians, and that could be part of it. But if it's 6 days before, I guess it could have an effect. To me, it would have had a bigger effect a couple weeks ago when polling started, because the last 2 weeks with polling in Indiana being done, Trump has been able to have all of the stories out there because he continues to poll, 5 points ahead or something like that in that state, and gets to brag up and down and sideways about it. Because you know how much he loves the polls, especially ones he's leading in. A Mitch Daniels or Mike Pence endorsement a couple weeks ago, like when we had that lull, it seemed like there was a couple weeks there were no primaries and they all kicked in again. Before, let's put it this way, before New York happened, I think that would have been better timing for an endorsement if it was going to come from those two guys or either one of them in Indiana. 6 days out, you know what it feels like to me? It feels like these guys were waiting for something else to happen so they could avoid doing any endorsing at all. That's the way it feels to me here, standing here in Madeira Beach, Florida. So it's like an endorsement, but not the greatest endorsement. We're going to hold out to the last second. So I don't know what's going to go on next week. I'll try to let you know Monday. Try to give you some prediction. Of course, as you know, my political predictions, the only ones I seem to get right are the ones in which Trump is going to win. Although maybe I did get, even Florida, my home state, I knew he was going to win down here. We all knew for a long time that Marco Rubio had no shot in this state. So we'll just have to see. But Ted Cruz is going to have this announcement. It better be a big deal, being that he's been selling it. So it was talked about it last night during his speech after Donald Trump won. It better be something considerable. If not, It'd just have been just as well to not mention it at all. Just let the announcement happen, just like out of the blue. Let's move on to... I did want to go back to something. There's this meme, M-E-M-E, going on out there about Chris Christie's wife. She was standing in the background of Donald Trump's speech last night, and when he was talking about women and Hillary, that she rolled her eyes or something like that when he mentioned that. I watched that maybe 3 or 4 times. I think it's being overblown. I think that's just somebody trying to stir something up, just trying to get a little attention. Do I see embarrassment on her face? Yes, but she didn't roll her eyes. I think she was just looking around, and I don't know what her politics are. We know what her husband's politics are. Is she like him? Who knows? Maybe she's more conservative than her husband is. I don't know. Maybe she's a flaming lefty. I don't know. But I didn't see that. Did she look a little embarrassed? Like, is Donald Trump going to do this? But yeah, maybe. But she didn't roll her eyes. I mean, as a writer, I have my characters roll their eyes, and that's not what I see in my head when I write that, which she did. She looked a little uncomfortable up there, but I'm not so sure that it had anything to do with what Donald Trump was saying. But overall, you know what? As I'm going to remind you again regarding all of this, we ultimately get the leaders we deserve. That's what we ultimately get. So if we end up getting Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, we earned it. Likewise, if we get Ted Cruz, that's what we've earned as well. We earn it. So just got to remember that. We ultimately get what we deserve. I hope we deserve Ted Cruz, but I think that ultimately we're going to deserve Hillary Clinton, which, looking at the current landscape in the United States, shouldn't be a surprise. You know, I was talking to, going back and forth with a friend of mine. I always say that, right? I'm not going to ever mention his name because he doesn't need this kind of attention. But last night but after the results had already come in, I was at the gym, and I'm going to take for granted my friend was at home, and he was talking to me through Facebook Messenger, and between reps, I was typing back to him. And I had sent him this article about Ben Shapiro. And if you remember who Ben Shapiro is, he's a guy who used to work for Breitbart.com, was the editor at large there, and then he quit because of the whole Michelle Fields thing, and I guess Ben Shapiro's out on his own now, and he's writing for some other places, and he also does appearances, does speeches. And I'd sent this article just as a kind of a funny thing to my friend about 10 ways to know if you are part of the Trump cult, and it was written by Ben Shapiro. And I wouldn't necessarily say that the article was necessarily insightful. It's, to me, as a writer, it seems to me to be more like clickbait stuff than an actual hard-hitting. I think anybody, if they sat down and wrote a list of qualities that Trump supporters have, they could have come up with what Ben Shapiro did. So the article really wasn't that special. However, I know that this friend of mine holds Ben Shapiro in high regards, much higher than I do, although I will say his stature in my mind has gone up since he quit Breitbart.com. I give him a lot of respect for that. But then this friend of mine emails me back and says, you know, that Ben Shapiro is a great warrior going out to these college campuses, you know, confronting these liberal students, and I typed back to this, to my friend of mine, and it said, you know what, call me cynical, but I'm just not that impressed by that. I don't think that highly of him doing something like that. And I want to tell you all the reason for that after the break, because it's time to go to the break. You've been listening to The Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we are back at the Dental Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to talk about Ben Shapiro, and he's not the only one. In fact, there's a recent example of Steven Crowder, along with some others, that went somewhere and got verbally attacked by a bunch of liberal kids and social justice warriors, on and on and on. So I want you to think that I'm picking out Ben Shapiro in particular. Instead, I want you to put this in the category of where conservatism goes wrong. Remember, I brought that up yesterday in regards to Kurt Schilling, ESPN, and all these conservatives coming to Kurt Schilling's defense of getting fired, him talking about North Carolina, everything else. And my opinion was, this is where we go wrong. All day, the people will defend Kurt Schilling, his freedom of speech, how he's saying the right thing and everything, and saying how bad ESPN is, and then they'll go turn on ESPN when they get home. I don't get it. This is another example of that. So these guys, Ben Shapiro and others, they get these speaking gigs. I don't know how they get them. I don't know if there's a booking agent. I don't even know how they end up on campus. I'm going to guess it's through some student organization, which is weird to me because I'm going to guess most student organizations around the United States are somewhat liberal, but somehow he ends up there, or any of these people end up on. We know that Ann Coulter and a bunch of others have gone to campuses over the years and got shouted down. Now, I'm going to ask you a very straightforward question about all of this. Has any of their actions, them going to these colleges, advanced conservatism at all? I want you to think really, really hard about that. Is there any proof that them going to any of these campuses has changed one mind? Because that's the reason we're out here, right? I know that's the reason I'm here. I'm here to change minds. But it seems that young people are crazier liberal than ever, to the point where they have no problems coming out and saying that socialism is way better than capitalism, at least in theory. Now, we know when they get out into the real world, that changes for most of them. But that has nothing to do with what they were told by Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, and Coulter 5 years ago when they were in college. Right? See, as I told this friend of mine, because I know why people and conservatives enjoy watching this stuff, because it's quote unquote entertaining. I just want you to know I don't find it entertaining at all. And I like a good political argument as much as anybody within the certain context. Okay? The issue you have with this stuff is after years of trying it, I don't know if it's changed anybody's minds. And if I know that, they know that. You know why they're there? 2 reasons. One I know for sure, and one I suspect. One I know for sure is they know that somebody's going to videotape it, and it's going to be great attention for Ben Shapiro, for Ann Coulter, for Steven Crowder. They know that somebody's going to have a camera in the crowd, and they're going to get it all on tape. And it's going to be on YouTube, which means these people, these conservative speakers, if you want to call them conservative, who knows what Ann Coulter is anymore, these well-known conservative people are going to raise their publicity level, their Q rating, because they know that's going to end up on YouTube or somewhere else. I would also say, to a lesser extent, they show up there because they're getting paid. Which I have no problem with that. I would hope if you're going to go out of your way to do something like that, that you're getting something out of it. But let's not forget that. Let's not just say that they're there out of the goodness of their heart, that they are there on their own dime. They're flying somewhere to get harassed. That's not what's going on. But we forget, and this is, once again, we get back to, this is where conservatism is going wrong. The mistakes that we make. We spend so much time talking to people who there is no way in heck that they're going to change their mind. Okay? That's the first part of this. What have I told you? I haven't mentioned this for a while. When you are trying to bring people to a movement and trying to change people's minds, you know what you go for first? You go for those people who don't know much, but they are eager to learn. You do not go for the arrogant know-it-alls, which is what those crowds are. If you really want to build a movement, you don't start with the people who are the most stubborn. You know what you do? You go out and find the people who actually vote. All right? You go and find those people who you think may be more receptive to your message. Instead, we have people going places where all they're going to do is create arguments. Don't tell me that they go there to expose these people. Everybody in the United States already knows what goes on at college campuses. The average American knows that a lot of craziness goes on there, and you know what? Half the American population love it. The average person in the United States knows that most college campuses are a bunch of young liberals. Some of them may stay liberals their whole lives. Some of them may change. A lot of that, if they do change, is going to come from themselves alone, not because of some speech that was given by Ben Shapiro, Ann Coulter, Steven Crowder, somebody else. But here's the reason. See, when I think about, now granted, I don't mind saying this, I'm not as well known as those people are. I have the show, Red State Talk Radio show. Red State Talk Radio is getting more and more popular. I hope that my popularity will go along with its popularity, the whole stations, the whole websites. Popularity. Getting a lot more downloads from the places that you can find this show, from Podomatic to Podbean, YouTube, SoundCloud, all those places. I notice an uptick in visits to my website, and that is all great. But I'm no Ann Coulter, and I can admit it. I'm no Ben Shapiro, and you know what? At one point, they were exactly where I am right now. But I know that if I had a speaking agent, I wouldn't want to go to those places. You know where I'd want to go? I want to go talk at an AARP event. I'd want to go talk at a minority, some sort of like Hispanic business owners event, or a black business owners event, or Asian. Those are the people who vote, but they also might also tend to be liberal, but they're not outrageous. They're not belligerent. They're adults. And that would go a lot longer way toward shaping conservatism and making more people conservative if the issue is to grow conservatism. And see, I don't believe these people are concerned about that when they waste their time going to these places. See, for example, in disc golf, every player talks about growing the game. What does that mean? That means if you're out throwing your disc, like practicing in a field somewhere, somebody walks by and starts asking you about, hey, what is this? What are you doing? You talk to them about the game. You talk about how fun it is, how cheap it is, that a family can do it on a Sunday in a public park. You don't need greens fees like in regular ball golf. You sell the sport. And you show them, you introduce them to something new. You don't blow them off. Most importantly. But what Ann Coulter and the rest of these people are doing, conservatives who do this, it's no different than disc golfers going to a ball golf course. The truth is, for most intents and purposes, ball golfers do not like us. They don't respect us. So to try to sell them on disc golf, I'm not saying you can't, but they see it as a challenge to their sport. So if you really want to grow the sport, you find those people who are receptive. You go other places where people are doing different things, that they don't have already that brick wall put up that disc golf is just something for stoners. All right? That's what it means by selling disc golf. Well, getting back to conservatism, it's the same thing. You go where people can be sold. You know the reason they don't go to those places that I just talked about, business owners? And you know what? Because they don't get any attention for that. They know that the possibilities of having some sort of argument and some blow up, some entertaining thing is very, very low. Okay? They know the odds of somebody pulling out a camera and catching something that's going to be put on YouTube that's going to get thousands and thousands of views are very low. And in that way, those people who do that, they're less concerned about growing conservatism than they are about just building their own brand. And that's the reason, getting back to somebody like Ann Coulter, that's the reason she goes along with Donald Trump. She's more concerned about her own brand and staying relevant than selling conservatism. So when you see Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, like once again, there's a recent thing with Steven Crowder. He goes on this huge rant fighting against these social justice wars. And I know that some people find it entertaining. And some conservatives probably watch it and pumping their fist. They're getting, yeah, that's what to tell them. Forgetting that that's not building. That Steven Crowder did not get one more vote for conservatism from doing that. Not one. Not one. In fact, those people, they go away from that even being more hardened in their position. Now, why is that? Because that's who they are. That's who young people are. You try to tell a young person anything about anything, not just politics, and they're going to blow you off. But still, these people, these conservatives, who could better spend their time somewhere else, go there. Once again, why? Because they know it's going to create fireworks. Conservatism does not need fireworks. It doesn't need it. It needs followers. It needs voters. It needs believers. So in that way, it's kind of like we're like Donald Trump. He's not about substance. He's about fireworks. He's about the drama. He's not about the substance. I know how badly, I know that how badly we want to see conservatives confront liberals and things like that. I get it. But there are other places to do that in different venues where arguments can be won and minds can be changed. Because those people, they're not going to give these speakers time. The people who go there to see them are already sold. The people, the young people, whoever arranged it and are going to go, they're already sold. And the people who show up and oppose them are already sold in the opposite direction. And I want to remind you once again, just overall, young people don't vote. Don't vote. Even Barack Obama, Yes, some more young people voted for Barack Obama, mainly in 2008. Did not carry over to 2012. We're better off working on those age groups, demographics who actually do vote. Older people, people in their 60s, people in their 50s, people in their 40s, business owners, people like that who actually vote, kind of follow politics, and aren't as hardened in their position. They have some experience. Now, some of them may still be liberal, and some of them may still be belligerent, and we all know that 65-year-old who still thinks it's 1968. But most people that age are not like that. Now, granted, you know I've had a lot of bad things to say about the baby boomer generation, but I tell you what, when it comes to talking to people about politics and getting a somewhat mature response, I'd still rather talk to baby boomers than college kids. Right? Because I think at least with baby boomers, they know when election day is. We do so many inefficient things on our side. Things, I think, in my opinion, are cloaked as a way to push through conservatism. What it is it's to raise the profile of some of these individual speakers. So I'm just totally cynical on conservatives going to these. I want to hear about them going to other venues. I want to see them doing speeches and things like that and convincing people and stop going to these places. It's just a waste of time. It's just a big waste of time. The people we should be most concerned about are the people who are voting. You have to get to them. These people, your kids you're talking to, these 20-year-olds who argue with you, they don't go vote anyway. They talk a good game. As soon as they're done, they go back to their dorm and they let election day pass right by. You know how I know that? Because I know what the facts are. I know what the statistics are about young people voting. You want to have an impact, go find the people that vote and change their minds that are voting liberal right now. But, once again, going to an AARP meeting to talk to people doesn't quite have the same ring to it as going to talk to a bunch of angry, spoiled, liberal white kids. Let's move on to something else. Along those lines, speaking of self-promotion and something to appearing to be something when it is something else, did you see that Megyn Kelly and Donald Trump are going to be doing, they're finally going to have a one-on-one interview May 17th. That's the date, right? That is, you should know, that's a long way from now. That's over, about 2 weeks from now. So a lot can change between now and then. This is also one of those cases where the only reason this is happening is for the profile of both. That's it. All right, I don't know what's going to go on. It still may never happen. I could never see Megyn Kelly necessarily backing out of this. However, knowing Donald Trump, I could see him backing out of it. He could take some slight, something that she says or something that Fox does between now and then to say, I'm not going to give them any additional ratings. I'm not showing up for that. I could see that happening. But after all this back and forth, aren't you a little jaded? Aren't you a little jaded? Going way back to last August, where I guess the whole problem started, at least the political problem. I think that these issues between Megyn Kelly and Donald Trump started well before that. In fact, to read as many interviews as Megyn Kelly has done, she kind of intimates, read between the lines, that it could be Donald Trump kind of had a crush on her and she kind of blew him off. I don't think it takes much to read into that. I don't think I'm imagining that. That after all this, all of the names that he has called her, that she's going to do this interview with him. Now, I'm going to ask you. I know it's supposed to be part of your job. She's not supposed to take that stuff personally. I get it. But do you really think, what do you think this interview is going to be? This reminds me, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me a lot of boxing and those UFC fights. One reason I don't get into boxing and UFC, it's just a lot of hype. It's just a lot of hype. What you expect to happen usually doesn't happen. That it's going to be this, at least in UFC, what's it go, 3 rounds? 5 rounds? You expect it's going to be this haymakers for 3 rounds, back and forth, these two great fighters. What usually happens? One usually knocks the other guy out in like 30 seconds. And then it's over. And you paid $50, $100 for the pay-per-view, and that's what you get. After all that hype. Why is it hyped? Because they need the money. For the attention. This Megyn Kelly, Donald Trump thing that's allegedly going to happen May 17th kind of feels like that. And I have to tell you, there is a part of me, I wouldn't say it's 50%, but there is a part of me who still suspects that a lot of this has been hype. All this contrived back and forth, them disagreeing with each other. You know what it's done? It's done nothing but to raise Megyn Kelly's Q rating and her attention. What's Megyn Kelly doing now? What's she saying now? Is she going to say something about Donald Trump? All of this controversy has done nothing but helped her. So why would she stop it? Likewise, same thing with Donald Trump, because he's created a bunch of people who hate Megyn Kelly. So anytime he says something about Megyn Kelly, everybody pays attention. And his attention factor and the people want to see the ratings for him go up. And I'm sure, and if I know it, both of them know it. And so it's not about the interview. It's not about the facts. It's not about Megyn Kelly getting deep into the recesses of Donald Trump's mind. It's for ratings. No different than Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, Ann Coulter, and the rest of them going to these campuses. Nothing is going to be solved. Nothing is going to be resolved. It's all just for ratings. It's all just for the attention. It's not about selling facts. It's not about selling conservatism, getting more people to vote Republican and conservative. It's just about the show. And unfortunately, getting, how this all started with conservative media, I think we're starting to realize that really what has been going on in conservative media as a whole for the last 20 years is it really hasn't been about conservatism. It's been about the show. All right? I realize you can't just get on here and be a textbook and like you're reading from The Wealth of Nations or The Road to Serfdom. Nobody wants to hear that. So you have to do some entertainment, but at some point it gets to be what you could say a little too entertaining, that you start doing your shows looking for the entertainment in it and just instead of allowing the entertainment to happen. And you start to maybe see that, people really like those entertainment sections of the show. And so you start going more and more toward that. And then suddenly it's not a conservative show anymore. It's just a political show. It's just a show. And I think that's why so many conservatives, after all this time, have embraced Donald Trump. Because you know what? Say what you want about him, but he is a heck of a show. But I'm going to leave you on that note. You can find me at edwarddensel.com. You can find all of my Red State Talk radio shows there. You can also find my shows at SoundCloud, Podbean, Podomatic, and YouTube. You can go to edwarddensel.com/book, where you can download for free the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks. Email me at edwarddensel@reagan.com. Twitter, Densel Domain. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to The Denser Domain on Red State Talk Radio.